Strap in. That's all I can say. Strap in, because this is a doozy. This is an episode you will not be able to pause or get out of the car or start doing something else. Tracy Hall, one of the last actual victim of Hamish McLaren, and he is the source of a podcast called Who the Hell is Hamish? And it was a huge podcast. Like, people were sending it to each other. Listen to this. My God, this is an Australian guy. This happened in Australia. Tracy is in that podcast, but she's now doing her own press tour because she's written a book about herself and her part. You will still probably want to buy the book because I do. I want to know more about this incredible woman because she's not just the victim that you think is the victim. I mean, no one is the victim, but you think scammers, you think old people on the phones, you know, who still have landlines, like, you know, and media, Tracy touches on this, media used to make us think that way. You know, so many people are being scammed these days in so many different ways. The media has changed, and thank God it has. She mentions that as well. You will, I think, really love the questions that I ask because she answers the things that I wanted to know. So I asked her the things that I wanted to know that I know you want to know as well. My producer was the same. If we want to know these things, you all want to know these things too. So please enjoy. Let me know what you think. Give her a follow on Instagram, Tracy Hall. In the show notes, we will have a link to her socials and her book. Buy the book. Why wouldn't you? Support this beautiful person. Here's Tracy Hall. Well, this is such an interesting story. Like, I just watched the documentary because I have a podcast. And I do 2 eps a week. I don't listen to podcasts a lot because it's work, right? Yeah. So I am more of a visual gal. And my best friend, she is a podcast queen, and this was one she really wanted me to listen to. Who the Hell is Hamish? And I did start it, and I must say it was quite interesting, but like I said, I'm not that into podcasts, so I was so excited when I saw that Channel 7 had done a documentary, and you were in it. So I want to start at the start, and the documentary is about a man called Hamish McLaren. Mm-hmm. You were his last victim. You've also just written a book, which we're going to talk about later, but let's start at the beginning. He's a con man and he swindled people out of money. You were his last victim. When did you meet him?
So I met a man by the name of Max Tavita in early 2016 on a dating app. I'd been separated from my husband for about a year, and I thought I was ready to get back into the dating scene. And, you know, I wanted to meet someone to spend some time with, to you know, someone that had the same sort of ideas about life as me, the same values and morals, and liked doing the same things as me. And it was slim pickings, to be honest.
Yeah.
It was quite demoralising in a lot of ways. And, of course, when, you know, Max Tavita showed up and he had, a megawatt smile and National Geographic blue eyes and great chat, great banter. We connected really quickly and we built a relationship over the next 16 months that was based on shared values and liking the same things. We loved the ocean, we loved running, and we just sort of hung out. And he told me he was a chief financial officer for a family office in Sydney, and I knew a little bit about that, what that was. And then over the next 16 months, we just sort of built our relationship, and it was very, close, a very intimate relationship. We were talking about our future. The weekend before he was arrested, we we're looking at properties in Byron Bay, thinking about, what the next 10 years of our life might look like. And yeah, so it was a pretty deep relationship by that point. And it was in July 2017. I woke up one morning to a Crime Stoppers video online of a man being arrested outside of his apartment in Bondi for swindling people out of millions of dollars. And His face was blurred out, but, there was not a shadow of a doubt that that was my boyfriend, Max Tavita, except it wasn't Max Tavita, it was Hamish McLaren.
So you got a phone call from, or did you call the police to say that's my boyfriend?
What had actually happened was we'd just gotten back from Byron Bay and I hadn't heard from him in about 24 hours, which was very, very unusual. And I ended up, after a very sleepless night and scouring the internet looking for friends and family to connect with to try and find out if something had happened, I ended up very early the next morning calling Bondi Police and asking them to do a wellness check on him.
Yep.
Because I just knew something was wrong. And they were off doing a wellness check on him, and a girlfriend of mine sent me the link to the video, and that is when I found out that he'd been arrested. So that's obviously why he wasn't answering my calls.
So that was the Crime Stopper video?
That was the Crime Stopper video, and I had called back Bondi Police and I said, well, you don't need to do a wellness check on him because he's not dead, he's been arrested. And they said, yes, we know that now, but the name of the person that you gave us, the address and his age, everything you gave us about that man is not the man that lives there. And I said, well, who is it? Who is this man? And they said, we can't tell you. You need to contact the detectives working on the case. And that's when I spoke to the head detective who had arrested him. And then, the dealings with the police started at that point. So I went up and spent pretty much the next 3 weeks with the police unravelling the previous 18 months of my life.
Tracy, can I just first say I'm so sorry that this has happened to you, like to anyone, but like I'm looking at a human, a beautiful woman who, we were just talking off air quickly about your daughter, and so I'm assuming he knew your daughter. You're a single mum.
Yes, of course. I mean, after nearly 18 months, he definitely knew her. The relationship built quite slowly because I didn't really want to infuse a new person in my life with
most women
with
don't.
Her.
Yep. Yeah, you have to learn, you have to earn that trust, don't you, from a partner before you bring a child in, which is the most appropriate way to do a relationship with a new person.
So.
And that would have been absolutely huge for you.
Yeah, it was. And it took a long time for me to introduce her. So the time that we spent together, I guess it's fair to say, was fairly limited because I had the majority care of my daughter. So I would see him when she was with her dad. Okay. But over, 18 months is a long time to go out with somebody. And, of course, she would hear him on the phone a lot because we would talk all the time. And they built a bit of a relationship through that. And then by kind of, the moving into over a year after we met and started going out, we took family holidays up to Byron Bay. My mum came along, my mum came and stayed with us. He met my family. They did have a relationship in the end, but it was mostly it was a few holidays, and then the rest of the time we spent together was really just when I had that space, on my own. So it was funny actually, Yvie, because when Hamish was arrested and everything just fell apart around me, I made a decision really early on that there'd be no tears at the dinner table.
Okay.
And that I wouldn't discuss it with her. She was really young at the time. She was like 6 or 6.5 or something. And it's very hard to explain a non-compliant superannuation fund and a con man who'd swindled people out of millions of dollars to a 6-year-old.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to worry her, and life had to go on. I didn't want to fall apart, and it's just me at home with her.
Yeah,
so I just had to
keep
her
going.
First.
And okay.
A blessing in a sense because that kept me going a lot of the time.
Oh, yeah.
But and I don't know if it was the right decision, but it's kind of funny now in retrospect because we just carried on. There were no tears at the dinner table, and it wasn't until about 8 or 9 months after he'd been arrested that we were in the bathroom one night, doing the nightly shower routine, and she says to me, "Oh, Mum, we haven't heard from Max in a while." and I said,
"Quite a while."
I'm like, "Oh yeah, he's just been really busy, babe. Like it's all good. I think he's just been super busy." And she's like, "Oh, okay." And she moved on. And that's the joy of children, right? Because they're so tangled up in their own world. Yeah. And of course
Adaptable.
She was very young and in that moment, I thought, I've done a pretty good job of hiding this.
You have.
And then she
not
didn't
only
know.
that, of protecting her.
Yeah.
You really did protect her, which you did a really good job because, a lot of people, we're just fallible people, but a lot of people are selfish in that way, that, such great parents are those ones who really do think about the ramifications of something that may be so devastating, how that would impact a child and trying to explain it, or them even just seeing you and really being quite fearful of you reacting in certain ways. I want to just go back to that moment that you found out and the next ensuing 3 weeks. The betrayal that you must have felt. Like, can you just take me there to put it bluntly, you were sleeping with this man. You were sleeping with the enemy. You gave him the most intimate parts of yourself. You, I imagine, would tell him the most intimate things about yourself. You were vulnerable. You trusted him. You relied on him in certain ways for certain things, depended on him. You thought he was a good guy. You thought, you'd found a really great person to share a future with. And then you find out that he is a fucking sociopath. Like, I'm so fucking angry. He just lies and lies and lies. Like, I can't understand. Can you take me there? What was that like for you?
I mean, first of all, it was disbelief because, like you said, this is a man that, would lie in bed next to me at night, and when I couldn't sleep, he would talk to me until I fell asleep. We shared everything, and I wholeheartedly believed that he had my best interests at heart. And so to wake up one morning and find that he's not the person you think he is, that's a very discombobulating thing for your brain to cope with because it was, the person that I loved and the person that I was building a future with and the person that I felt like was my person and had my back and saw me actually didn't exist.
Didn't exist?
No.
Like, how do you compartmentalize that? As like, were you a mess? Like, were you
that's
numb?
one word for it.
Well, I remember you saying in the doco, when you spoke to the detective, like you had to go and vomit.
Yeah, I felt a lot of physical reaction during those weeks and months afterwards. I'm not a big person. I'm a small framed person, and I lost 6 kilos in 3 weeks. I could not eat. I could not sleep. I could not rest until I knew how it all fit together. And I think in terms of compartmentalizing, it was like a death. Yeah. So the man that I loved and the man that I was building my future with died in that moment because he actually didn't really exist in the first place.
Right. So he was dead and gone.
He was dead and gone, but it's weird.
And you have to grieve that.
Yeah, there was grief around that. But then I felt bad for grieving because it wasn't a real person. Like, it was so confusing for me.
Oh, God.
But those moments where you go, just call them and tell them that, or just because, you get into these habits and it becomes part of your life. And in those weeks afterwards, I'd be like, just call Max. Oh, shit. It's
not even his name.
I know. That was really hard. And I think part of it for me was, and this is the thing I've realised, is the thing about our brains is we don't like unfinished stories. And we either make up the ending so that we can rest, or we remain in this state of complete confusion and, you just can't rest until you've got the ending or you've got the pieces of the puzzle. Yep. And during those weeks and months afterwards, it was very, very difficult for me to get information about the last 18 months of my life. Yeah. So obviously I could research him and what he'd done previously because I had his real name now, but the police really couldn't tell me very much other than, go through my experience. They couldn't release any information about other victims, his family. Legally, of course.
Okay. How frustrating.
Yeah, and then of course his family were very tight-lipped. They wouldn't talk to me, friends, etc. So I was trying to finish a jigsaw puzzle in my mind so I could put it to bed, but I couldn't because I couldn't get the information. And I think that was what was really difficult for me. And it wasn't until until I spoke to Greg Barrup, who was the journalist from The Australian who did the podcast, Who the Hell is Hamish, that things really started to become clear. So I lived in that world for over a year.
Oh, that's long.
It was a long time. And at the same time, I was single parenting. At the same time, I had lost all of my financial security, every piece of savings, all of my career superannuation, any shares I had, and I had my monthly salary. And I had, it's not lost on me that I had a really good job, but I also worked really hard, and I couldn't lose my job. So I was just working my ass off during that time, just like, I've got to keep my job.
Busy.
I can't lose my job.
Yeah.
Because that was the only financial security that I had.
Yeah.
So there was all of this stuff going on as well. And at the same time, I'm just trying to kind of figure out this parallel universe that I'd been living in for the last 18 months.
I did kind of put it out there to a few people who had listened to the podcast. What would you want to know if you could ask her a question? And I had one person say something that was really offensive to me, but a really valid question. And I answered it, so I'll tell you what I answered it to me. But because it was offensive to me. She didn't mean it, but she couldn't help it. She said, she goes, I don't want to be victim blamey, but I just want to know, how stupid can you be to give someone your money? And I answered, he'd been with her for a year, never talked about her money ever. And when he asked her, if this is correct, please correct me if it's not. When he asked her, do you have a self-managed super fund? And she said no. He was like, well, you should, because you'd make a lot more interest. And he's a CFO. So he's been going to work with her every morning. He goes off to his office and she goes off to her office. So why? Well, I know bankers, I know stockbrokers. If someone that I've known for over a year said to me, Yvie, have you ever thought about, maximising your money? Like, that's what I do. I could help you. I'd be like, here's my super fund, because I don't know how to do that. That's how easily it can happen. I know, like, we all know people in banking, in money, someone who has something, and out of 100% of people, you've got 1% who are going to be con men.
Yeah, I have so much to say about this because, and first of all, I'd say, when it all happened, the victim blaming probably came from me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the most.
Very quickly and the most. And
how did I let this happen?
Yes, pretty much nothing anyone could say to me that I haven't already said to myself.
Yeah.
But what I do know after all of this time, and it's been many, many years, is that it's very difficult to describe the insidious nature of this type of crime and the coercive control and the grooming that happens over a very long period of time that gets you to that point. So when the media, and to be honest, currently the media are doing a fantastic job at all of this, this kind of narrative. But previously the media would do these sensationalized stories like, vulnerable divorcee loses life savings to con man in, another country or whatever it might be. Yep. And you see those sensational headlines and you flick past them because you think, what an idiot. I would never do that. Yep. And I was one of those people. But what I want to do in bringing this story forward is help educate people like your friend who, and in fairness to her, I probably would have said something like that as well. Mm-hmm. But what we know about, the function and these types of relationships where there is so much grooming and so much coercive control, in my case it was financial coercive control, is that if Hamish had knocked on my door one day and said, hand over your super and your savings, Trace, and off I go, I 100% never would have done it. Yep. This is a man who weaseled his way into my life over a period of nearly a year and a half. He pretended to be somebody else. He completely deceived me on all levels, both an emotional and a professional level. The number of conversations that we had about finances, about his line of work, about what he was investing for some of the wealthiest families in Australia, the different strategies, the prices of gold. I would overhear conversations with people that existed. I still don't know who these people are, but I could hear them on the other end of the phone talking about the closing price of gold, what happened in the French election, how that's impacting the US economy, what investments we're doing, what, he would send me, and these are just a few examples just to paint the picture, but he would send me an email every week, every Friday, that he purportedly wrote to all of his investors. That was pages and pages long about what's happening in the market and the stocks and how they've traded them and what's happening with the investments and what the predictions are. He had Bloomberg monitors set up in his apartment that he tinkered on the whole time. There were official they were fake, but he had forged official documents of the investments that he was doing for me, pages and pages long, showing me the different trades and what it started at, what it ended at, and these are just a few examples of, the way in which he created this movie, I guess you could say, that, by the time he asked me about my superannuation and how much I was paying in fees and that he could do better for me, I had this confirmation that he was exactly who he said he was. And this is the death by 1,000 cuts. This is the coercive control. This is the, the deceit to get me to a point where I 100%, without a shadow of a doubt, believed that A, he had my best interests at heart, and B, he was the perfect person to help me be financially independent for the rest of my life.
Yeah, there really wouldn't have been a better person because you were with this person and they had your best interests at heart. Ideally, this situation would end so differently for so many other people. This particular story is quite an anomaly because, most people who are in the money sector are legit.
Yeah.
So this was truly bad luck.
Yeah, I think so. And, I often think, people who run small businesses or I've worked in marketing for 25 years, and people that sort of say things and come to me and ask questions, I would offer them advice and offer to help them do their marketing, for example. Yeah. And someone would look at me and go, okay, well, she's been working in marketing for 25 years. Sure, she'd be a great person to do it. Now, I don't have ill intent.
No.
So that's the difference. But the grooming that happens in these types of things that you don't realise, because it is death by 1,000 cuts.
Yes.
And I think that's what I'm really keen for people to understand, that, it doesn't happen in the way that you think it does in a 2-minute clip that you might see on a current affair program.
And now you've written a book. I'm assuming that this is two-pronged for you, advice to give, a warning, but also quite cathartic for you.
Yeah.
What was it like going through it all again?
The book is broken into 3 parts. So there's a before, a during, and an after. And so each of those sections describe my life in that moment in time. So it's memoir. So the before part really sets the scene of who I am as a person, what's happened to me in my life. And without giving any spoilers, a lot had happened in my life before I even met Hamish. So I lost my dad when he was 53, very quickly to leukemia. I very soon after lost my best friend's husband died at 31 in his sleep. We ran away to India together to deal with that, so that was fabulous.
That's good, yeah.
And then, I got married and had a baby, and then my mum got breast cancer when my daughter was 5 weeks old. So I went through my maternity leave, with her doing that. And then I had a miscarriage, and then I had a divorce, and, a lot happened.
Yeah.
And the reason
a lot happen.
That's a lot. And it's not to dwell on those things, and it's written very, there's a lot of humour in there as well. But essentially what that does is set the scene for who I am as a person. I've dealt with grief. I've dealt with despair. I've dealt with heartache. And then, of course, it goes into a lot of detail about my relationship with Hamish, how we met, how we built out. And I needed 75,000 words to explain the insidious nature of what happened.
Yeah.
And so we go through all of that. And then, of course, the after section is what happened after he was, he was arrested and then sentenced, and the podcast finished. And what you're left with is a life that you have to put back together.
Yeah.
And I think it was a really nice round out because, I had built up a level of resilience and strength, and I knew that even though it was one of the worst things that's ever happened to me, it was horrific. It wasn't the worst. And I knew that, I mean, it was pretty bad.
Yeah, but wow to say that.
Yeah, but I knew that if I could get through those other things, then I could get through this. And I just had to, I had to give it time. I had to give it some energy. I had to be very self-compassionate. Like there were so many things that I'd learnt from the before part of my life that helped me with the after.
Yes.
And I don't think you need to be swindled by a con man to feel intense levels of grief, betrayal, heartache, trauma. We're all going through things, right? And hopefully the story acts as a bit of a beacon of hope for anybody going through a tough time that, there is a tomorrow, there is hope, you're going to be okay. Mm-hmm. But it just takes time.
Yeah. Well, that's really big of you to say and understand that, have that kind of perspective over, because, they say health is the most important thing, and mental health is also a really big thing, and that would have been so affected if nothing physical or in your medical health, that mental health would have been so incredibly crushed and sick. But just going back to what I wanted to ask before, because you mentioned that during that year the family were tight-lipped. I remember in the documentary you had met his brother.
His brother-in-law.
His brother-in-law, and he'd called him Hambone, and then he quickly, when you said, what does he call you Hambone? Because his name, Max to you, he was like, I was a skinny little kid and need to put ham on the bone. Like he was just so good at what he did, like so fast, sociopathically, pathologically lying, so incredibly good. I mean, if anything, part of me goes, pay him a little bit of money because of how hard he works at his sociopathy, but I totally do not believe that in any way.
No.
But the tight-lippedness, so what were you trying to get from them, and why wouldn't they talk to you?
I think, in some respects, they were Team Hamish.
Right. Really?
What's family, right?
So they were not completely and utterly ashamed of this horrendous man.
I mean, I'm sure they were, but
they had his back.
I guess it's family. I don't know, maybe they were concerned about talking to people, talking to the police. I don't actually know the answers because I never really spoke to them. I did have a call one day from his niece who somehow got my number, and she called me and she said, I've just spoken to Hamish, and he wants to see if he can get your money back. And there was I can't remember the exact. I was not a very good place, but I do remember she said, Hamish wants me to tell you to go for a swim in the ocean and just wash it all off, Trace. And I said to her on the phone, are you for f***ing real? Like, this man has just completely financially and emotionally flattened me. I'm a single mum. I have no idea what's happening. No one will talk to me. And you're telling me to go for a swim in the f***ing ocean and wash it all off? Like, go f*** yourself. Like, honestly.
How old was she?
I don't know. I guess in her 30s, I
30s,
guess.
right, okay.
Yeah,
okay.
I never met her, but...
Yep. But she's an adult herself.
Yeah, and, I don't...
So he'd swindled... He was Darvoing everyone. He was grooming his entire family. Like, obviously, he had family visiting him, or because he was on bail, but on remand, was he? Or?
No, he never got bail. So this was one of the fantastic things that the investigators
they were worried about,
did,
weren't they?
He was a flight risk, of course, and they had enough evidence over the time that they were investigating him when they arrested him that they were very confident that he wouldn't get bail, which is what they wanted. So he was arrested that day after we got back from Byron Bay, and he has never been out since.
And he's due for parole 2026, is that
July
right?
2026 will be 9 years, and he'll be up for parole then.
How do we stop it? Let's sign a petition. No. Okay, so the family, were they there at the trial? It wasn't a trial, was it? Because he pled guilty.
It was a hearing. Like it was a process. I don't know what the proper terminology is.
But you were all there. I loved the shots of you all out the front holding each other and just being there for each other. Like
so supportive.
Are you all still in touch?
Yeah, we are. I hosted a dinner up at Pillow in Freshwater last week, and there were 95 people there, and one of the other victims, Karen, came along to support me.
Loved Karen.
Love Karen. Beck and I still talk a lot. We're definitely in touch. Having been connected with Beck actually, and this is sort of where after that year of just hell, and then Greg started investigating, and he was fabulous. Like Greg is just the most compassionate, kind, empathetic man, and he would call me almost every other day as he was working on this project and say, "Oh my God, Trace, you're never going to believe what I found out." And I'm like, "Okay, give it to me." He goes, "He's got a wife." And I was like, "What? Huh?" And they weren't married, they were divorced. And he said, "Did you know he was married?" And I said, No, but nothing surprises me. And I said, can you ask her if it's okay if I contact her? And he said, "Of course, she's amazing, Trace. Like, the thing about this man, he's a complete asshole, but God, he's got good taste in women."
Well, I give him that because he did. Like everyone that,
It's
I mean, just you, but
and all the other victims as part of this case weren't in an intimate relationship. They were more in a business type of relationship.
Or friendship, because he really became friends, didn't he?
He was really, really good at weaseling his way in. But when I met Beck, because they had been married, and there were things that I could talk to Beck about that I couldn't talk to anyone else about, and that was so comforting for me. And her and I would spend hours and hours and hours on the phone just dissecting him, I guess. And that
you needed that.
It was really helpful for me. It was very healing.
And her, she would have been really helped by talking to you.
Yeah,
about it.
It's true.
And hearing that she wasn't the only one who believed his bullshit.
Yeah. And she's great. She's so much fun.
Did you get your money back?
No, not one
Anyone?
of us. No.
Why? Where? Why?
Well, as part of the investigation. Yeah, why?
Yep.
Well, that is the $7.6 million question, isn't it?
It really is.
Literally. Look, as part of the investigation, the police reported, or that part of what they put together was that there is no money anywhere. There is no money in bank accounts in Australia for him. There is no money. So that was the extent of their investigation into the money flow, and they had forensic accountants on it. And they did take us through in some detail. I think what happens in these cases, and, I can't be certain about this, but their job and their remit and what they're incentivized to do is to put people like Hamish away for as long as possible. And they absolutely did that. His sentence was actually 16 years. So he actually was sentenced to 16 years in the initial
what's the detective's name?
Tom Zadravec.
Tom. So Tom did say he was told you all were looking probably realistically at 3 years for a crime like this.
Yeah.
And he was so ecstatic when he got the 16 years.
He was like a dog with a bone, that man. He was amazing. And it was one of the biggest sentences for white-collar crime in New South Wales that we'd ever seen. So it was significant. So in that regard, the police and Tom and his team did an incredible job. And I will be forever grateful for the work that they did on that, because I know, in talking to Tom, how hard it is to prosecute fraud. Yeah. But I guess as part of that, their job is not to follow the money. Their job is not to rest until they find where that money went. Yeah. Their job was to prove the crime and to say that there's no money left. Yeah. So none of the victims got any money back. And I guess there's still, this unanswered question in my mind is there actually any money out there? And there's no one looking for it because, of course, when you've lost all your money, you don't have the funds or the resources to pay a private investigator to go looking. So we've just had to accept that. But, it'd be very interesting to see, what happens in a couple of years or whatever when Hamish is out and whether there's access to money anywhere.
What's your ideal outcome?
I have accepted that I will never see that money again.
Okay.
And I mean, the ideal outcome is that I get my money back, but I think that's a very long shot for any of us.
And Hamish? What's your ideal outcome there?
Look, just that I have nothing to do with him ever again. I mean, I would like to hope that there is some level of rehabilitation. What I know about him and the type of person he is, and over the length of time that he's done what he's done globally, I don't hold out too much hope. But at the end of the day, it's up to him. He's the only one that knows what's going to happen, and he's the only one that's in control of that. I guess for me, I have chosen to spend my energy on rebuilding my own life, focusing on my daughter, my career, becoming financially stable again. And, in these last few years, expressing what happened in the form of a book to make sure that not one more person goes through what I went through.
Yeah, good on you. Tracy, thank you for coming on.
Oh,
I really appreciate it.
So nice to meet you. I love your voice as well. You're so calming. You should do meditations.
Oh, okay. I could do that.
I would totally fall asleep to your voice on the Insight Timer every night.
I'll
Not in a creepy way. Not in a creepy way. Just like in a really chilled, relaxed way.
Oh, thank you. I'll pop that in the annals and have a think about it. Thank you for being so honest, so upfront, vulnerable, reliving these parts. Congratulations on your book. Good luck with the sales of it. I really hope you do well. To me, you just can't trust anyone. That's what breaks my heart, because at the end of the day, you have to look at your own family and friends and say, who do I trust?
Yeah.
If that could happen to me. So I'm just going to, I know that's a negative. Say a but.
Well, I definitely see the world differently now.
Yeah, good.
Because I probably, I've never come across anyone like Hamish before. I don't know anyone like that. Yeah. But what I would say is that Hamish is an outlier.
Yeah.
And I think if you go through the world only looking for the red flags, that love and kindness can't exist in that world, and that for me is a shitty place to live. And I don't want to live in that world. So I choose to believe that he is the outlier. I do think that we need to be vigilant. I do think we need to be more aware, more critical. I was probably not critical enough in my thinking. Okay. And not to say that I could have critically thought my way out of the fact that the man that was, spooning me in bed every night was also plotting to destroy me. But I think, I just want there to be an awareness. I know that I won't be the last victim. I hope that I am. Mm-hmm. But sometimes just having a little thought in your head that there's a level of awareness, not that you're looking at everyone like this, but I don't know. I choose to believe that the world is a pretty incredible place. He is an outlier. He deserves to be where he is. And the rest of us, I don't think we should go through the world not being trustful, but just being curious, a bit more curious.
I love that. That's actually helped me. You've helped me.
I don't want you to feel bad leaving this convo.
No, I mean, that's my own shit, isn't it? But I really, really respect that opinion and that view of life, and I really appreciate you saying that. So I am just so glad that you are at that place in your life, because that's where you deserve to be, and I'm really glad that you're there, and we'll just leave it at that. Thank you so much, Tracy.
Thanks, Yvie. So nice to meet you.